Well, Mr. Hagan, it's a pleasure to be in your home, your beautiful home here today, and it's a further wonderful opportunity for me to visit with you and and meet you, not meet you, but to talk to you about your career and your background as one of the outstanding attorneys, not only here in Greensboro, but the state of North Carolina. And before we get into it, though, with the activities that are now going on in the state of Florida and up in Washington today before the United States Supreme Court, and all this talk about, some of the talk about history, and it was pointed out in many ways that this was not the first time there'd been a fuss, I use that word advisedly, over who was going to be the next president. It's infrequent, and I'm sure delighted with that, but they said there was a fuss back in the 1800s between Hayes, who later he became the president, and a fellow by the name of Tilden, Tilden, I believe it's the way it's spelled.
That's right.
And the reason I'm prompted to ask you about it is, I've always known you as Charles Tilden Hagan Jr. And I was just wondering what relation you were to this Mr. Tilden, whose name was, I'll get it in a minute, but it was Sam Jones was his given name, Tilden. And he was one of the barn busters. That was a party they started back in the 1870s. They were known as the barn busters. He basically was a Democrat, as you are. And I just wondered if there was any relationship there.
None whatsoever. I think that Mr. Tilden, a man of some prominence, and so somebody along the line put his Tilden in the name, just like a lot of people name their children George Washington, Smith, Jones, or whatever it is. So I think it's related to that situation. Mm-hmm. No kinship at all.
That's interesting. Well, I just thought it'd be nice to have that in the record now.
Yeah.
If you don't want it in there, we can strike it out, can't we, Mr.
It's in there.
Man?
No, that's
But then we'll
right.
move on. Well,
let's move on.
Interview. But anyway, you are now at the stage where you are totally free to talk about all you've done and to do it in a way that nobody will accuse you of being boastful. We just want you to tell it like it was. Tell it like it is.
Okay, start.
You have no concerns about telling for it sounding boastful in your part. Now you were born here in Greensboro, as I've
That's
always
correct.
understood. And tell us a little bit about your family, because they've been prominent for well over 100 years in this town.
Well, my father was from Newton, North Carolina, born there. His father you'd call him a manufacturer, in that he had buggy business, manufacturing buggies. And every town had 2 or 3 of those folks manufacturing buggies, I think. My grandfather, the one I'm talking about there, was interested in politics here, I understand. Old Mr. R. King, who told me about he or his father was running for mayor of Greensboro. And his opponent had a supporter who said if he elected the opponent, he would he'd donate a fire truck to the city of Greensboro. And my grandfather had matched the offer with, I'm sure, with the help of some friends. And Mr. King was elected, and my grandfather and his friends did come up with a fire truck, another fire truck from Greensboro. And I remember those old steamer fire trucks. They had the round thing like a chimney. And I remember a fire at the corner of Elm and Church Street, no, Summit and Church Street. That one of those pumpers or whatever you call it was there. It's a fascinating thing. I lived on, initially, shortly after my birth, we moved to Summit Avenue. And I was very happy there. I was there during World War One. I remember some horse-drawn artillery that came by there. Well, there were a number of units that came through there. It was fascinating. And in those days, the railroad was a grade crossing there on Summit Avenue. And we'd see the troop trains coming through. No air conditioning, so all the windows were open in the summertime, and the soldiers were waving, and folks were handing them stuff. And then at the station, they would give them coffee and cookies and whatnot. So that was all very interesting.
Well, now, your education started here in Greensboro, in the public school, what was then called the public schools, is that right?
Yeah.
And then tell us a little bit about your educational background.
Well, I went to school at the old, at the school that was there about where the library is. The museum, excuse me, the museum.
They call it the Lindsay Street School?
Yeah. And there was a big sign out there, one of those metal things, that said that Lindsay Street School was the first graded school in North Carolina.
Public school.
Public, yeah, graded.
That's right.
School. And we had a principal named Miss Irvin. She was Hunter Irvin, the one-armed lady. And the story was that there was an electric switch in her office. And all the children were frightened by that electric switch. And I took it up with my father, and he confirmed that there was an electric switch in the office. And that really helped my behavior pretty much. I remember going to the principal's office one time, and she had an 18-inch ruler that was thick. And she heard what the charge was, and I was convicted immediately. And she told me to put my hand on the desk, palm up, and I did that. And they just whaled the devil out of my hand with that 18-inch ruler. I never went back. I behaved from then on, which makes me wonder if maybe a little more strictness, or maybe a little corporal punishment wouldn't help things now. But it had worked with me.
Well, you got a good start with Miss Irvin as a teacher, and there were even a few of those people in teaching school here when I came along, just a few years later.
Mm-hmm.
But I agree with you. Mr. E.H. McBain was the principal of one of the schools I attended, and he didn't have a little ruler, even though a big one. He had a big long paddle about 3 feet long, and about an inch thick and about 4 inches wide, with a couple of holes bored in it.
Yeah.
And that would aerated it a little bit. Well, anyway, we both have been along those roads, and I think we testify to the fact that they've done us a lot of good. Now, when did you decide that what you wanted to do, make up your mind about a career? How old were you when the thought seized you that said, I've got to decide so I can properly educate myself as to what career I'm going to follow in life?
I think I was in high school. I decided I wanted to be a lawyer.
And then did you decide where you wanted to go to law school?
Well, that was, there were a number of factors that entered into that selection. One, the Depression was on. So many people now don't know what the hell the Depression was. But that was mean. Those were terrible days. I remember I was going with a girl, and I was down at their house on a date, and the phone kept ringing. Her father was a traveling salesman, and he talked to her. I could hear him say, "Well, yeah, well, I can let you have $1." And what the fellow was calling about, he needed gas, and he needed money to buy gas to call on his customers. It was that sort of a situation where the people were, it was sort of a hand-to-mouth existence. So I have an uncle, my mother's brother, one of her two brothers, who had a pretty high position with General Electric, and he was putting me through school. So I went to Carolina for 1 year and enjoyed that. It was nice. And the next year, they opened up the women's college to men. And so I stayed at home and went to the women's college, which had some charm too. What
year was that? What year was that?
Oh, let's see.
Was that about 32? 32.
32. There was I reckon a class of about 120, 130 males. And there's some damn fine people in there. Burke Davis was in the class.
You're talking about the writer now.
The author.
The author.
And John Lindemann was in there. He's smart as hell. And a number of Greensboro guys were in that class. Then I wanted to go to law school. I wanted to go to Carolina or the University of Virginia. Carolina required 3 years free law. Virginia required 2. In those days, if you could promise to pay the tuition, they'd take you. There were very few people in colleges at that point. And I was wondering, I thought maybe I could go in the legal department of GE by reason of my uncle, or I could practice law in a little town where my mother grew up, in Bedford, Virginia, or I could practice here. So there were 3 alternatives if I went to Virginia, and there would be only 2 really if I'd gone to Chapel Hill possibly. But anyhow, I went to the University of Virginia, and it was fine. I enjoyed it.
Now you graduated from University of Virginia about when? 36?
36.
36. And doing your studies and tenure there at the University of Virginia, you also involved yourself in the military programs there. Is that true? Or
Yeah.
where did you first become interested in and involved with the reserve program?
Yeah, the word there is inappropriate. The Marine Corps in 1934-35 began a program called Platoon Leaders Class, in which you go to a Marine base in the summer for 6 weeks, basically for 2 summers. Then upon your graduation, we were given a commission in the Marine Corps Reserve. And that's what I did. And enjoyed it. I'm very happy that I did. But I did that during my years at Virginia. I got in and then went to summer camp and all that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. And you obviously enjoyed the Marine Corps,
Yeah,
and
very much.
you stuck with it through the age of retirement. Isn't that correct?
Yeah.
You
Great
want-
outfit.
Hmm?
It's a great
Great outfit. Well, now tell us a little bit about, you don't need to tell it all, but just tell a little bit about the experiences you had in terms of how you moved up from the time you got your commission. As a second lieutenant, I take it, that's the bottom
Yeah.
commissioned officer's rank, and through the time that you ended up as a major general. That's a
That
two-star
was
general.
long after the war.
Well, that was after
Yeah.
the war and everything. But tell us about your experiences leading up, let's say up to the war.
Well, let's see, in the fall of 1940, the World War had begun, Second World War. And I had thought, as it all built up over in Europe, that ultimately it's going to be one hell of a war, and furthermore, that sooner or later we would get involved. And I just started preparing for that when I went into the Marine Corps Reserve. But in the fall of 1940, I reckon, war started in
War started you up in 39.
39. Well, this
Yeah.
would have been in the fall of 41.
Mm-hmm.
No, God damn it, it's been 40. Anyhow,
Yeah, it was going
I
pretty.
went up to Washington and went to the Division of Reserve. And how I found the damn place, I have no idea. But anyway, I was late. Went in there and I talked to one of the officers in there, a colonel, I think. And I said, look, I ain't asking to get in, I ain't asking to get out. I just want to know what is the situation. I'm a sole practitioner, which was true. And incidentally, at that point I had officers with Beverly Moore, and he was great. He helped me tremendously. But I said, what's the situation? And he said, well, if you're sole practitioner, my suggestion to you is that you close as many cases as you can and collect as much money as you can, because I think we're going in. And it wasn't within a couple of months after that I got a mimeographed one-sheet letter from the Commandant of the Marine Corps.
Welcoming you.
They said the Commandant contemplates assigning you to active duty for training. The period of your training will be for not less than a year, and probably for the extent of the national emergency. By that time, Roosevelt had declared a national emergency. So anyhow, I went up to basic school in Philadelphia, which was a fine school. And that's how I got started there.
Well, before we get in maybe further into the military end of it, what inspired you, or is there anything in your life or family's history that inspired you to go into the practice of law, to become a lawyer, or want to be a lawyer?
I don't know, I thought it was going to be fascinating, and I thought it'd be very interesting.
Well, do you remember your interest in debating or in things of that sort that
Well, yeah,
generally lawyers get involved in?
yeah, I was on the debating team. Used to have a thing called triangular debates in the state. And we had in the triangle, I think it was Greensboro, High Point, and Winston-Salem maybe. I know Winston was in it. And you debated around. And well, I was on the local debating team. And we got through the first one or two successfully. Then we went down to, I think it was Chapel Hill, and debated down there. And a fellow named Joe Johnson, who taught English at high school, was the coach. He was later in the had a men's clothing store later on.
Oh,
Johnson and Albert or something. like that.
Johnson and Albert, yeah. He is the same one here in Greensboro.
Yeah, he was that fella. So I was up there haranguing him, you know, and I was waiting for old Joe Johnson to tell me, you know, you're doing right. And he wasn't doing it. He wasn't making any motion at all.
He wasn't encouraging you.
Well, he was doing the best he could, and I was too. And I thought, God damn, maybe I better talk a little louder.
Yeah.
So I started talking a little louder, and that didn't help. Well, anyhow, we got beat that time.
Yeah.
Well, it was a lot of fun. There was a fella whose father was a lawyer that won it. And he was the smoothest guy you ever saw. I don't know what his name was, but he won the state championship. But he was damn good. All right, what's another question? Let's go.
All right. After you had made your decision to go into the law, and you already indicated you were a sole practitioner initially,
Uh-huh.
and you had an office. Where was your office, and did you have any arrangement with anybody else?
Well,
Give us the names of the
well,
people.
it was with
You-
Beverly. Beverly before the war, and Beverly after the war.
Uh-huh.
At least I thought it was going to be Beverly. But he was, see, he graduated from Los Angeles. And so when I was 6, when I finished it, I came down here and shared an office with Beverly. And he did the best he could with me.
Did he give you
helped me a
cases?
lot.
Did he refer cases to you?
Oh yeah, he'd help me get a case, yeah.
Yeah.
But most of the time he needed them himself.
Yeah.
I couldn't expect him to, you know, take food out of his mouth to put in mine.
Uh-huh.
But he was very helpful. And then when I got this mimeograph sheet from the commandant's office about going on active duty, I think I closed both of the cases that I had.
Close both of
Yeah, I
them.
think both of them.
Now,
And what?
when did you become involved with Jack Kleemeyer?
That was
And-
after the war.
After the war.
After the war, I came back and called Beverly, and he was just opening up his office. And so I told him, well, here I am. And Beverly was very kind, and he said, well, okay, we'll get space for the two of us. And I thought, you know, that was wonderful. Well, then 2 or 3 days later, Beverly called me and said, all signals are off that the Saps had asked him to join their fund.
Mm-hmm.
And he was going to accept that offer. And so then, while I did not know Jack, I had heard about it. And he'd been practicing, I think before the war, with Charlie Tillett in Charlotte. I think he was there with Tillett for a couple of years before the war.
Now that was Jack Kleemeyer.
That was Jack Kleemeyer. So he was here, and he was looking for a place to light, and I was too. So Jack and I got our offices together. And at some point, Walter Hannah started sharing the office with Jack.
Well, now, was that first association with Jack Kleemeyer, your office was over there in the old Dixie building, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Or when did you go to the Dixie building?
I think we started in the Jefferson building and then moved to the Dixie building and then moved back to the Jefferson building. Now, when we first had offices in the Jefferson building, there was one office. And we came in about 6 feet from the door and put in a glass partition.
Yeah.
And then we put the two desks between the glass partition and the window. There was one window.
Mm-hmm.
But one against one wall and one against the opposite wall, which worked fine until we both tried to stand up at the same time. We could not do that. We had to push your chair back. So we had a chair out in the first little area where the secretary and her desk was, and there was a chair there for a client to sit. And then we had a chair too in where the desks were. And then if he had a client, he'd pull up close to his desk, and I'd back up from mine and walk out. I had something to do.
Pressing business
Yeah,
away from the
pressing
office.
business, and leave the client in there with Beverly. And occasionally when I had a client, he'd
Did you
show me the
likewise?
same courtesy. But then finally, then we went to the Dixie building, and then we got back into the Jefferson building.
Well, and when you were one of the founding partners of Adams, Kleemeyer, Hagan, Hanner, and Fouts.
Yeah, it started off.
And we want to get into that, but before we get into the details of that arrangement, I was going to ask you about your life in public service, because you were the prosecuting attorney here,
Yeah.
and I remember all this from my history and background and having grown up around here. What a great job you did as a prosecutor. And you were in that job for about 8 years, as I recall.
Yeah.
And I
two
think
terms.
we need to tell about that.
Well,
How you got the job and how long you had it and some of the outstanding cases that you participated in.
well, came back from the war, and got home in January, so along in there.
You're
February
46.
45.
45?
Yeah.
Boy, was still going big in 45. Yeah, it was. It was 46. When you got, I mean, after.
Maybe it was 46 when yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, 46, all right. What were we talking about?
Talking about when you got back from the war and went in
Oh, yeah.
to the
Well,
practice.
Yeah, and that's when I got
And
with
became
Jack
solicited.
Kleemeyer.
How you got to be solicited.
Yeah, and I wasn't overwhelmed with clients, and I wanted to practice, and it seemed a good time to run for public office as a prosecutor. And so I did, and was very fortunate to win the Democratic primary, which in those days was, quote, tantamount to election,
Election, yeah.
because the Republicans weren't active at all. And I always had the hunch that for a while it had seemed to me that they were not recruiting Republicans. They were not seeking Republican lawyers. Because when they got in nationally and they got all the appointments, they didn't want to spread it around the people that might claim But anyway, that's just my notion.
There was some talk about that.
Yeah,
the
I
other
think
day.
a lot of people felt the same way. Well, anyhow, I ran for solicitor, and a lot of people didn't know what that meant. And some people, and you were my assistant for 3 years?
3 years.
3 years. That was in my second term.
That's right.
I had the first Charlie Ivy as my assistant, and then Jim
Clonks.
Clonks from High Point for 2 years. And then I got you. And we had a hell of a good time. We really did. It was a lot of fun. And I had 2 counties in the district. And it was Guilford and Davidson County. And Judge H. Hoyle Sink, who was a resident judge, talked the county commissioners into giving me a little money for an assistant in Guilford County. Now the solicitor in those days and his assistant, we tried every felony case in the district of consisting Guilford and Davidson County. And of course, Horace, my assistant, didn't go down to Davidson County, he stayed up here. And we handled everything there was. We'd get a few special terms of court. When I had court in Davidson County, Horace would get a special week of court here. And the docket was a little bit behind when I came in. By the time the 2 of us left it, it was current. It was a very simple system. I'd try a case. While I'd trying that case, Horace was preparing the next one. And then when I completed my case, and particularly when we had Judge John Henry Clement from Forsyth County in Wine. And he'd say, and let the defendant be confined in central prison for a period of not less than 3, no more than 5 cases. Now call your next case, Mr. Solicitor. So, but by that time, Horace would be standing up with a file in his hand. And as soon as John Henry would say, call your next case, Horace would bump out, stand against Joe Blow. We could not break him of doing it that way. He wanted to make it out like he was running everything, and he was. He was a good judge. So Horace and I practiced together, and it was a hell of a lot of fun. On a big case, one in the last week or 2 or something like that, we both work on that.
Mm-hmm.
Now it was a good arrangement.
Tell about how you and I could sit together and without either saying a word to the other would know what the other was thinking and about the questions that would occur to each of us or both of us.
That's
same
true.
question at the same time.
And it still is to a large extent. Because neither one of us remember names too well now. And
not now, not anymore.
Yeah, not now. And when he starts talking about somebody, he can't think of his name. And I know exactly who he's talking about, but I can't think of his name either. And it works both ways. But we did get to know each other, what each other was thinking pretty well. But we had a good time. Horace was going to run for solicitor, and he preferred to do it from outside rather than from the courthouse. So he did not work for me the last year. 8 years I was there, we were convinced he's going to be elected. So we jointly considered who would be a good assistant. And we wound up with, come on,
D.P. Whitley.
yeah, Dan Whitley, which was a damn good idea, because there would be one or two cases that might be more than a year old. And Horace would know that when he came in as solicitor. And if it was from
6 months.
6 months old or something like that, Dan would know it because he'd been my assistant. And then when Horace came in, he kept Dan as his solicitor. So we had a damn good continuity. There was somebody in the office who knew the facts in every case that we were coming up with, on the background.
Now you, other than you've gone through a number of the associations that you had after the war, being solicitor and Kleemeyer and some of the others. Now tell us a little bit about the big one when you left the solicitor's office and you retired from that job. You went into and set up, participated in the setting up of a firm, a good sized firm that has grown and prospered through the years and is still one of the top firms in the town and the state, for that matter. So tell us a little bit about how Adams, Kleemeyer, Hagan, Hammer, and Fouts got started.
See,
we can't remember all the names.
well, in the fall of the year that I would be terminating, U.G. King got with me, and we started talking, and U.G. Was an exceptionally good lawyer. He was from South Carolina, not kin to the king and king of that firm, or the Walter King crowd, but he was from South Carolina. And his first name was UG, which indicates it's South Carolina. UG had been interested in politics to a degree, and there were all these people that said, oh yes, said Hugo, and a real close friend. Hugo. And
Huger.
But anyway, UG had been mayor of Greensboro, and was one of the, supposed to be the youngest mayor of a city that size in the country. He was mayor at the time of Pearl Harbor, and signed and went in the Navy, and Mr. Sullivan became the mayor of Greensboro. But anyhow, when the war was over, UG and Jack Kleemeyer and I agreed to establish a firm, the name of which was King, Kleemeyer, and Hagan. And we had as one associate Walter Hammer, who had been having offices with Jack Kleemeyer. And so that's how we got started. We got
Bill Adams. Tell me how Bill Adams
well,
get involved.
Bill came later, but Judge Pless has been nice to me, and he used to have a party the first weekend in June, stag party, up at a cabin that he had on Mackey's Creek up in McDowell County. That's beautiful country up there. And here's a little sort of shotgun-like cottage. Right there was a little narrow little road, came with it forded the creek right there at Judge Pless's place. And from there on up, it was National Forest. Beautiful stream that came through there. But anyway, Judge Pless had gotten got the way he was liking me. And so I would go to his party every year. Matter of fact, I did for about 30 years. The locale of it would change as everybody got older. But among those who would always come to that kibbing party, as it was called, was this is awful. And I generally tell everybody, well, I'll tell you tomorrow what his name is, but that won't work with this thing here.
You talking about Mooneyham?
No. Mooneyham was, yeah, he was one of them.
He came, didn't he?
But no, who was on the Supreme Court later on.
Yeah,
He was a partner of,
can't think of that. You're not talking, well, of course, that was late, much later when Joe Branch came along.
oh yeah.
He went up there once or twice.
No, before that.
Yeah.
Horace used to come to that party too. Partner of Earl McMichael.
Oh, over in Winston-Salem.
Yeah. Oh God, come on now. Judge.
I'll have to tell you tomorrow, Chuck.
Oh yeah. But, Dan Folks worked for him. It was his clerk.
I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, well, just
Yeah,
for
I
the
know
hell of it,
this-
let's tell somebody.
Yeah, just tell him what this, he was a big lawyer in the Reynolds case for the murder.
Yeah.
The murder over
Yeah.
there. They accused this fellow of that being murder, and this fellow later he got on the Supreme Court, was the lawyer you're talking about, thinking about. I'll tell you in a minute.
This is awful.
It is,
Cut
it
that
really
thing
is.
off. I don't want to show us up like this. You're as bad as I am.
Y'all will think of it later.
Yeah,
Well,
we'll go ahead with it.
well, anyhow, Dan Folks, when he finished law school, was a clerk for one of the justices, associate justices of the Supreme Court. One of whom was a very close friend of mine.
Yeah.
And he told me, he said, "Hey, Charlie, you're looking for any
He had one bad
associates."
eye too, didn't he?
Yeah. And he'll come to him. And I said, "We might be." And he said, "Well, he had a clerk, as smart as hell. And he said, you'd do mighty well if you could get him as an associate." And he was talking about Dan Folks. So we got Dan Folks. He was our second associate, Walter Hanna being the first. And we've always been very grateful to the justice for putting us on to Dan Folks. Carlisle Hagan is who I'm referring to.
That's who you think about, Carlisle. Yeah.
Carlisle Higgins had been a partner of Earl McMichaels. And Earl McMichaels had been the solicitor over there in Forsyth County. And Carlisle had the reputation of being one of the few people who could strut sitting down. And he could. But he was the best solicitor in North Carolina, according to all the judges. So when I ran for solicitor, Judge Pless was holding court here. And he said, "Charlie, why don't you, if you like," he said, "I'll line you up over there with Earl McMichael, the best solicitor in North Carolina. You go over and sit in there and watch, see how he does. He said, it'll help you." I was delighted, and he lined it up. with Earl for me to go over there. So I went over there, introduced myself. He said, "How do you do?" and walked off. I had a legal pad with me. When I went, that was Monday. I went back on Tuesday. And this is just when I got out of the armed service. And Tuesday, I saw him. He looked at me and he said, "You back?" And I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "You really want to hang around here?" I said, "I certainly do." He said, "All right." Did you come and sit behind the table behind me? And so I went there every day. And the second week, Earl had a capital case on the calendar. And he asked me, said, "You ever had tried the capital case?" I said, "Oh yeah, I've had 5 of them, before, where the court would appoint a lawyer to represent a fella being tried for his life. And the state of North Carolina, by statute, would pay that lawyer $25, which I always thought was the most outrageous thing in the world.
It's pretty good in those days.
Yeah,
I mean,
it was a horrible thing.
Yeah.
They should have done, just let you volunteer. But then to pay you $25 for representing the man on trial for his life, it always just sort of nauseated me. But anyhow, over there with Earl, so he said, "Well, I've got one with Mr. Edwards," and he said, "Got a special night coming in." And so we called that case Tuesday, and we went through the routine of, the solicitor said, "Mr. So-and-so, stand up and put up your right hand, put it down. You stand indicted by the name of Joe Blow," or whatever it is, "on the following indictment." And how do you plead? He says, "Not," he's standing all this time. "How do you plead?" He says, "Not guilty." "How will you be tried?" And the answer is, "By God and my country." And you go through all those formalities. So we went through those formalities. And we started the selection of jurors. And after we'd found 2 that were satisfactory to the state and to the defendant, Earl turned to me and said, "Charlie, it's all come back to you now?" And I said, "Yeah, yes, I got it." He said, "All right," said, "I'll take that plea of second degree that Southeastern Edwards been trying to get me to take." So he stands up and tells the court, "Your Honor, please," said, we were entered into an agreement whereby the state will be satisfied with a plea guilty of murder in the second degree." The judge said, "Very well." And so they dismissed the jury, and the others hanging around up there waiting to be called. And I noticed that the clerk had gone up to the bench, clerk of court, and I thought that I'd seen the judge motion to. So in a little while, the Judge Rousseau was on the bench. And Judge Rousseau said, "Mr. Hagan, did you see me call the clerk up here to the bench?" "Yes, sir." "Did you see him go back to his desk and start writing something?" I said, "Yes, sir." "Then did you see him come up to the bench and say something to me?" I said, "Yes, sir." "You know what he said to me?" "No, sir." He said that it cost for Fife County $480 to bring in that special venire. Did you see me say something to him?" I said, "Yes, sir." "You know what I said?" "No, sir." I said, "Mr. Clerk, take that bill of cost and bill it to Mr. Hagan. You may be seated. And of course they were joking, but what he was trying to let me know is by damn he knew what was going on in court. He knew this was just a facade, this trial that Forsyth County had paid for. It was just for the enlightenment of this young fellow, Charlie Hagan, from Guilford County, who was getting ready to take over as solicitor. But he was a wonderful guy, he really was. But he had a funny way of carrying on conversation. Like, do you do this, do you see that, and all that. But he was a great friend of mine and of Horace's, and a wonderful judge. All right,
Well, now, let's go into something else here now.
all right.
What is, you've seen a lot of changes and a lot of things that have passed before your views in the practice of law and things related to the practice. Could you, not taking too much time, sort of run through some of the most significant changes that have come about in the law practice? I'm not talking about the changes in the law itself, but in the practice and how it's organized, and the lawyers that we are now bringing online to take care of the needs of the legal profession. Can you tell us what you've observed in that regard?
Well, one thing, when I first came to the bar to practice, there were several very distinguished lawyers, and they were characters. There was no such thing then of continuing legal education. The continuing legal education that we got was in two fashions. One, the young lawyers, there were so many of us were sole practitioners and not very busy. But we'd go to court to watch the top flight lawyers. And there were two in particular we'd like to go to. And that was when Mr. Cliff Frazier was representing the plaintiff, and Mr. Sapp, the elder one, was representing the defendant. Mr. Sapp had quite a practice, and one day he waked up and he couldn't talk except like that. And he was a trial lawyer. And you'd think it would ruin him. It didn't. Because the jurors all leaned forward just to see if by damn they could understand what Mr. Sapp was saying. And he was a great lawyer, and so was Cliff Frazier. And I remember one case over there, they were trying an automobile accident, and there was a woman in this car and something else there. Anyhow, we'd had some testimony, and so Sapp asked this woman some question, and Mr. Frazier said, Jackson said, she said she was asleep. No, Sapp said, she waked up, wide on cue. But it was that sort of stuff that went on. It was fascinating. And the other thing was that about once every 4 or 5 weeks on a Friday afternoon, Mr. A. Wayland Cook, who was the clerk of the court, would tell him to pass the word. At about 4 o'clock he was going to be through. If any of us want to talk about practice before the clerk of the court to come down there. So hell, there'd be 6 or 8 or 10 of us who'd go down there, you know. And Mr. Cook would tell us about the various things that were referred to the clerk and how was the best way to handle it. Now, his predecessor had been thrown out of office by reason of improper
Infidelity.
handling of money.
That's Mr. Mason, wasn't it?
Yeah. No, that was his first name. So that don't go into his name because they're relatives around.
Oh, they're still relatives?
Yeah.
Okay. I
But he was
recall that
directed to
estate.
court, this other fellow, and at that time, the state was still paying widows of Confederate veterans some money each week. And there was still a bunch of them around because a whole lot of little young girls in their 20s who married Confederate veterans who were then in their 70s because they knew about that
Pension.
pension. And the clerks of the court were handling that money that the state had appropriated. And the clerk here was not very careful, but when the widow died, he was still writing the checks and endorsing them. And so anyhow, he was thrown out, went to prison. So it really put a hell of a blemish on the administration of justice. And the lawyers were going to do their best to try to, clean it up. And so they were looking for the most trustworthy man they could think of in the bar. And the unanimous feeling was, and Mr. A. Whalen Cook was it. And I think he was. He was the most meticulous fellow there ever was. And he would always say, I'm just sitting on a powder keg, and he was always worried, but he was a damn fine clerk. And he was great in spending some time working with the young lawyers. So those were our two sources, other than, reading the opinions. And I reckon among the first to do anything like that was Wake Forest. I had gone to the old Wake Forest for a coach class, and Dick Douglas was down there too. And Dick and I had not gone to law school in North Carolina, and we felt like it was important to take this coach class. And Dean Gully of the Wake Forest Law School was the instructor, and he was a wonderful guy. And we learned a hell of a lot from him.
That was for the bar exam.
Yeah, they're getting ready for bar exam, but that's all of it. Something I just thought of, not necessarily right along what you're talking about.
Right.
But the other things were, then the practice of law was definitely a profession. And then they began to try to get a little bit more businesslike in the manner in which they practiced law and ran their offices. And so now it's reversed, I think. Practice of law has gotten to be too damn much of a business with some ethical aspects thrown in. It's different. I liked it better in the old way of doing practicing law.
I've heard you
Those are the main
say,
difference, huh?
I've heard you say many times in talking to young lawyers, the difference between a business and a profession. In a business, you go into it, the objective is to make money. And you go into it with that particular reason. A profession, you go into it to render a service. Of course, incidental to that service, you've got to charge something in order to keep on doing it. And so you don't really worry about your fees like you do about your profit and loss statement if you're running a store or some kind of business. Are you still of that frame of mind?
Yeah, well, hourly rates was not, never even heard of when I first got started.
Uh-huh.
And the big firms came to that, and they had to, for several reasons. One is to get a fee that's commensurate with the time and trouble and skill with which the matter is handled. And then when you start splitting up the take, it's nice to know how much time and effort each of the guys that might be working on that case devoted to it. Well, I think it's part of our business is one reason for it. And the other is, I don't know, maybe it's sort of like the difference between an agrarian life and an urban life. It's more relaxed in the old days.
Well, that's true. Now, let's get back to your motivating factors in going into the practice of law and staying in it once you got into it. Do you, if you want to, name some of the lawyers, a lawyer or several, who may have had great influence on you, that inspired you, number one, to get into, and two, to stay into the profession?
Well, Beverly Moore was sort of my mentor in many, many respects. He was very, very helpful to me throughout my practice of law.
During those 30s and 40s.
Yeah, and later. But, Judge J. Will Pless had great influence on me. I admired him greatly. But, and then some of these lawyers that I just, they didn't know how much I tried to learn from them. But there was some lawyers who were just damn good.
Well, along that line, Greensboro used to have, and I don't know, and I'm not cutting off what's going now, I'm not as familiar with the current group of the leading lawyers in town as I was 20, 30 years ago. When we had people, we had what we'd call characters, but they were entertaining, they were honest, they were a lot of fun to be with, and you touched on that, and I don't know whether you want to put on the record some of the names of some of them or not,
well,
in a very friendly fashion.
Yeah.
The stories you can tell about it.
Yeah. Well, one, it was a hell of a fine lawyer, was Welch Jordan. And Norman Boren. And Welch would associate Norman with him frequently. Welch had a quality about him. He was smart, and it showed. And people tended to be, witnesses tended to be a little afraid of Welch.
Intimidated by him.
Yeah. And as an example, I remember telling some witnesses out in a case, and I said, now, don't go into this phase of it. Now, if you ask about it, well, of course, go on and talk about it, but let's just leave that alone. Just stay with me. All right, yes sir, I'll do that. Well, he gets on the stand and Welch starts talking to him. And the guy gets scared. And Welch realizes something there. He had the damnedest ability to sense those things. And so he'd start squeezing in.
Poking around.
And by then the guy would finally say, and then, you know, like what, but Welch had an uncanny ability to know when somebody was not coming through fully, or there was something he hoped he would not have to tell or talk about. Welch was one of those. Bob Cahoon, in the old days, you did not have to get your motion in writing and serve it on the fella, head of court and this, that. We didn't practice law that way. It was more oral than written. Although we'd file briefs in cases, and that's probably in civil cases, but I still remember that when we'd go to court Monday morning, and Bob Cahoon had a case on the calendar, he always had a bunch of them. He wondered what motion Bob's going to come up with today. Because he could think of a better motion walking from his office to the courthouse than most lawyers could sitting in the office the whole damn weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Bob was one hell of a good lawyer. And he'd come up with something and he'd sort of take us by surprise, but we'd work our way around. I don't know, but what that's, you may get to justice a little quicker that way. Somebody brings a suit against your client now. Now we're seeking the truth in these cases. We say. But the first 30 days is spent doing nothing but seeing whether or not the plaintiff followed all the rules of procedure. Spend a hell of a lot of time. Can we throw him out on this? Can we throw him out on that basis? And we're getting too damn technical. That started in the federal court. And the state courts have followed right along. But if a lawyer slips up and lets the time go by or anything else, something like it, he's done irreparable harm to his client. Of course, and we didn't practice that way.
Didn't cross the I's, dot all the T's.
Yeah,
Like they have to now.
yeah.
Those
The
changes.
substance of it was more important than the form.
Mm-hmm.
And now the form is much more important. Now, I don't know what the hell is more important down in Florida right now.
That's a good one.
But I don't, but it was a profession then.
That's right. Well, now, Mr. Hagan, let me ask you this. You dwelt on the profession and your associations and relationships with a lot of the lawyers in the bar. But in addition to being one of Greensboro's top lawyers, in any way you want to look at him, you have also been a very prominent citizen in the business community and in the civic and church community here. I think about the role that you played in bringing about a lot of good things here in Greensboro. And I don't know whether you want to just start off and tell us about some of them. There are too many of them for you to sit here and talk about the rest of the day. But I think first of the influence you've had on the Coliseum out here, the way you have handled that matter, and it's been really probably the top through the years, the top leader. There have been some other very significant leaders, but they've come and gone fairly quickly. You have stayed on it all of these years, going way back into the 50s, as I recall, when Mayor Sullivan was there and other significant leaders of Greenville. Tell us something about that and what encouraged you to do all that other than your just plain patriotism.
Well, Mr. Sullivan, as mayor, after Eugene King resigned and went in the Navy, Mr. Sullivan, then the mayor pro tem, became the mayor. And in '43, he had, under his leadership, the city council appointed a War Memorial Fund Commission to raise funds and determine the nature and scope of the memorial and so forth. And that was the way the Coliseum developed. The city council said that they wanted it to be a living memorial, not an obelisk or a cannon, something like that, but a living, as an auditorium, and they specified an auditorium. And so then during the war, they raised about $400,000, and right after the war, they had enough fundraising drive and raised about 400,000, a little over 400. So they had a total of about $900,000. They thought it taking $1 million to do it. Of course, that was wishful thinking. And I got on that commission in 1946 or 47, and I've been on it ever since. But I'm now on it as an honorary member for life with no vote. But I still go to meetings and enjoy it. That thing was very interesting. The city council and the War Memorial Commission were at each other's throat. And mean stuff. And we couldn't find a site. So one day we waked up and there was an article in the Greensboro Daily News that the city council had bought property on Forbes Street, which is now the southern extension of Church Street. And they picked a site there, and they picked a type of building, and it was going to be a rectangular building with a stage in one end and a flat floor for basketball and some little places for people around, sit around as observers. And so that was a hell of a blow. The building as selected by them was not good at anything. It was not good auditorium, it was not good basketball court, because everything lacked something. You had a stage, instead of having elevated seats, people to observe what's going on the stage, you had a flat floor. And you had a flat floor that was all right for a basketball, but you're losing all that space where the stage was. Who wants a stage where you're watching a basketball game? The whole thing was badly planned. And finally went to court. Now you had something to do with that.
I was a lawyer.
You were a lawyer. You representing Herman LeMaster Smith.
Yeah.
Before he became the clerk of the federal court.
That's right.
And Judge Susie, didn't she hear it
I think she heard it at,
at the Supreme Court level?
she was Superior Court, I think.
No, I don't think so.
Well,
But anyhow,
I don't know.
it going into
German was my client.
yeah. And anyway, the court it came up with a damn fine opinion. It said one, oh, little fact come back first. When we first started with that fund commission, it was during the war, during that first fundraising thing in which they got $400,000. So the big corporations were already subject to the war tax, and the whole hell of a lot of extra taxes came on as a result of the war. They wanted to make sure that the contributions that they made would be tax deductible, which is sensible. And the only authority they had was an ordinance of the city council, and they thought that was, kind of shaky. So they took the ordinance that the city council had adopted down to Raleigh, and it was changed into the same wording, an act of the General Assembly. And then that's where the city played hell as far as running things, because that ordinance gave tremendous powers and authorities to the Fund Commission, which the city council felt like was all right. If they didn't do it the way they wanted to, they'd tell the commission that the council had appointed how to do it. But they lost that possibility after it became a state statute. And that's the thing that makes a difference in having a shown up facility and having nothing really. Because using that as a springboard, they said the acts of the city council about that stuff on the Fourth Street was beyond their power, because they had put it into the hands of the commission, and they couldn't do anything now because they couldn't change that now because it was a state statute. Well, so anyway, that cleared the atmosphere considerably. So we've come a long line. We had the best manager in the country was Bob Kent, who was our manager for about 6 years, about 6 years. He's the best man in the country. He later went to Atlanta, head of Omni, and then he was to get him to come, and he left. To get him to come back, they had to give him an interest in the building, and which he deserved, and they sold, and so Bob had an interest.
Now, Mr. Hagan, let me move on to a couple of other things.
All right.
We are getting pretty close to when I promised you we'd try to relieve you of any further interrogation. You've tried a lot of great cases, big cases, important cases, to cities, towns, people, and all, personally as well as in business. Can you name 2 or 3 of in your view, the most significant cases that you have been involved in and actually played a role in?
Well, one was Lichtenfeld against Security National Bank as trustee of a trust, and that was drawn out. Lord, it was something. It was tried before Judge Scotty Campbell, and would waive jury. So once we got started, every week or 2 week period that he was not already assigned, he would hear us on that case, which meant that hell, we were on the case all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you know, we tried for a week and he'd be busy on something else for 2 weeks, but then he's coming back and following. So hell, we work on it all the time. And lawyer for the plaintiff led us all over hell's half acre. And we were foolishly followed along. And when it went to the Supreme Court, Judge, when we were talking about,
You're talking about one of the federal judge.
yeah, no, the
Carlisle
state,
Higgins?
Carlisle Higgins.
Carlisle.
He was on the court at that time. He chided us
Mm-hmm.
for the plaintiff was getting lawyer to England and all everywhere else, and all over the United States he could find a damn screwball case. Old Higgins in his opinion charged us. This was a North Carolina case governed by North Carolina law. Law was clear and why Carolina. Well, we didn't try to go that side, but when the other side did, we felt like we had to follow, you know, to distinguish the cases. So that was an interesting one. And then we had one in the federal court that was Russell against American Tobacco. And that went to the Fourth Circuit twice, I think. I know it went twice, maybe it gone 3 times. And that went on for years. And it was a real, very, very interesting case. And Julius Chambers was appearing for the plaintiff. And that's when I got to know and admire him greatly. He's a fine man. And he had a lot of things that people treated him unfairly. He had an office in Charlotte, right on the edge of the business district, into what had been a residential district. It had a nice frame house that he bought. That was his office. And he had a firm of 5 or 6 lawyers at that time. Somebody came in and tore the place up, set it on fire. It was horrible. And and Julius had been, I think he'd been the editor-in-chief of North Carolina Law Review. And anyhow, the law students at Chapel Hill, they turned out in mass. He went down there, helped him straighten his office out. And it was a real mess. As soon as we saw it in the paper the next day, we called and told him that not to worry, but what he, you know, in pleadings and so forth, in that case that we were trying, that we'd send him a copy of everything we had, except, you know, we wouldn't give him any of our
Confidential stuff.
Work product, yeah.
work,
Yeah.
what we did. But, and the other lawyers did too.
Well,
He's a great guy, yeah.
there's one case I want to direct. It's not quite like these you mentioned, but recalling the interest in this case and the number of people affected by it, and your role in it went on for several years. I just wondered how you would grade it in terms of importance, and that's the one, George Smith.
Oh,
The the racketeer here
Yeah.
that you pursued for so long and so ardently, and I just wanted to see how you'd rate that one among your crystal balls.
Well, that was, I thought, a lot more important case than the general public thought. It was called the butter and egg case. And it was a lottery. And you win by what shows up in the paper on the butter and egg market somewhere. I don't
Chicago,
know
I
that.
think.
I think it's that, yeah. And so it was a hell of an operation. They had writers who would go around, and this was particularly prevalent in the low income population. And these guys that write the tickets, they'd write a ticket and the guy would pay for it. And then that guy would turn his money in at night. And they operated over several counties. And in the course of his doing that, and this is the part that made it bad, was even bribing the police officers. And it was very difficult to prove it. And that was the reason I was so concerned about it, was the bribery. And those police officers did two things. One, they looked the other way when it was Smith's people. But they would arrest the guys who worked for competing enterprise. And it was a small, but nevertheless, George Smith wouldn't put up with it. So it really was a hell of a bad thing for the community. And so we went after George, and he was hard to catch.
They were tried, how many police officers charged with bribery? In that?
5, 6,
four,
4
five,
or 5, yeah. I could name 2 or 3 of them,
Mhm.
not for this purpose, but, and they were nice guys.
Yeah.
A friend of mine, I thought, I was surprised to know who they were.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we tried those. And what finally got George Smith was his running over a young boy on a bicycle, killing him, and hit and run.
Leaving the scene.
But we got him on that.
There was a unique, old antiquated legal procedure used. It goes way back into the common law.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
we named it was declared him an outlaw.
that's right.
Yeah, outlawry. The law of out. You don't use that anymore.
That's about the last time they used that.
I think that's the last time and the only time in our lifetime it's
The only
been
time I
used.
remember it, but I got pissed off.
Get the posse, huh?
And that fellow was running around, you know, and he was arrested. He was out on the bond, and he didn't come to court. So Judge Ruderson was on the bench. He's from up in the mountains. I went to see him one afternoon, and I told him we were having a terrible time with that damn fella. And he was thumbing his nose at the law. And it was kind of making us look kind of like a laughing stock. I didn't like it. So I said, I told him, I said, I'll prepare. Will you declare an outlaw? At my urging, he said, yes, he would. So we declared him an outlaw. And that scared the hell out of him, because a lot of people
They brought
hated
him in.
A lot of people hated this guy, Crip Smith. And so he showed up pretty quick.
Didn't he call the sheriff, to refresh your recollection? Call the sheriff and say, Sheriff, I'm gonna come in if you'll guarantee me safety.
Yeah.
And the sheriff said, yeah, we'll protect you. And so they arranged for a mutually understandable place to meet, and the sheriff brought him in. Well, Mr. Hagan, I want to tell you, in keeping with my word now, if you want to go ahead, because you've really just gone to the just on the surface of this, but I've got to run to make another engagement. I don't know about you and the rest
Well,
of
we
these
got
gentlemen.
2 or 3 things. You
But I
all got
wanna-
to run, and I've been running my mouth too long.
No, you haven't. No, you haven't. You haven't
Well,
told us enough. But we want to thank you. At least I'm going to
Yeah,
thank
definitely
you.
appreciate it.
I'm
That
gonna
was a
shove off
great
here.
interview, yeah.
And you've got Mr. Lynn over here, who is quite an interrogator, and so is Mr. Gaylord. He's not only good with the machine, he's good with the questions, interrogation.
Oh, well, okay. Y'all want to quit? You're going to.
Horace, I can ask a few. You want me to ask a few more?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, you got some good ones.
Well,
But if y'all excuse me, I'm going
All
to
right.
run and turn you over to the
Well, we may all need to go. I don't know what your.
okay, yeah, I was just thinking of maybe having Charlie talk about, chipping the firm or anything like that, the family.
well, yeah, that'd be great.
I mean,
because he's-
we have 5
he's-
more minutes to do that, or?
Sure.
y'all go ahead. I know all about that. I think I do. And y'all go ahead and
Well, but
get
this is for the archives,
him to
so,
tell about it, huh?
Yeah, this is for the archives, so people know that.
Yeah. Well, we want everybody to know he's Chip's father, though.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you know it's cotton. What? I used to have an identity. Now, I'm Chip's
Now you
father.
Chip's father.
Or Kay's father-in-law.
Yeah.
Or Henry's father or whatnot. This is fine.
You got that back on?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, we're gonna have you tell a little bit about your children and,
Let me know.
and maybe in particular your son Chip, who's with your firm, and
hate to leave.
all the great things your family does together. I know you've taken some boat trips, rent a couple of big boats down in the Caribbean, and have some great family outings.
Yeah. Yeah, all of us enjoy sailing. And we charter down in the Caribbean. And John and David and Chip and Henry all are qualified skippers. And so we don't have to take any crew with us. And we got this right big crowd when we get all the family together. So we get 2 boats and a cook for each boat. And then we just have a wonderful time. Well, I have a daughter that lives in Winchester, a suburb of Boston, and she went to Randolph-Macon in Lynchburg and got an A.B. there. Then she went up to Boston and went to up there. I don't know, she went to BC or which one of them.
Tufts, Boston University, BC,
Yeah.
something like that.
But she got a master's degree in deaf education, and so for a number of years she worked with the deaf, and she finally has retired from that. And I know it was a thing that she got a lot of joy from, and the ones that she could help, and a lot of frustrations, and the ones that were sort of beyond help.
Oh, go ahead. I'm behind his car.
You want me to go on?
Yeah, keep going.
Well, I'm sure you're proud of the public service you did. That's
yeah. The what?
I'm sure you're proud of the public service that your daughter.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, I am very proud of that. And then the four boys, they're all of them hard workers, and doing all right, and I'm very proud of them. Now Chip is in the law firm. He went to Carolina for undergrad, and went in the Naval Reserve while he was down there. And he had the option. I think if he made a 3-year commitment, he'd stay in the reserve. If he made a 4-year commitment, he could be in the regular Navy at the end of the 4 years. So when he finished Carolina, he did that. He took that 4-year thing. And he wound up as a hell of a good deck officer. I've seen some of his fitness reports, and they're exceptionally good. So he seriously considered staying in the Navy, but he loves the water. And then he also considered practicing law. And I left him alone on it. And I was real glad he elected to practice law. So he went to Wake Forest, and down there did well at Wake Forest in law school and joined the firm.
And you have a couple of other sons, I believe, living in town here, and another son in the Baltimore area?
Yeah, one in Baltimore who's president of Monumental Life Insurance Company up there. And then John and David, who are twins, they live here in Greensboro. And John is in the recycling business up in Lynchburg, in Reedsville. And got a plant up there. And David is in industrial real estate. So all of them are doing well, working hard, and that's good.
And you have several grandchildren too.
Yeah, I got 7 of those.
Yeah, one at California Institute of Technology, Jeanette. So
Yeah.
You gotta have some real scholars for your grandchildren.
She's smart, as she can be. And Tilden, her brother, younger, he's very smart. I think so. Well, as a matter of fact, I think on this end, and the Baltimore people too, they all the grandchildren are smart. There's been considerable discussion among the older folks as to where in the hell the brains came from. I think it must be from the other side of the family. But anyway, they all are doing mighty well.
Well, that's great. You have a place up in New Bedford, Virginia.
Yeah.
You go for vacations, and it's a vacation home. We get up there fairly often.
Right. My grandparents lived in that house, which they bought in 1906. And I spent a lot of time up there as a child. You know, grandparents spoil the hell out of you.
Sure.
Charlie, what was your date of birth? We didn't ever get that on the historical record.
April the 20th, 1913.
1913. And your parents' names?
My father was Charles Tilden Hagan, and my mother was Ann Guy, G-U-Y. She was from Virginia.
Okay. We're about to run out of tape here. That's why I wanted to get that on there. We're about to, not the tape, but the battery. Battery's about out.
Yeah. Well, we'd sure like to thank you for your time and your gracious hospitality and your great interview. And this will go in the archives of the Greensboro
Appreciate
Bar
it.
I'm
Association.
sorry to have
Appreciate
taken
it.
so much of your time.
Oh, well, we're honored,
Done
we're
a good
honored,
job today.
we're honored
Appreciate it.
honored to be here and have you,
Yeah,
agree to do this.
well, I'm glad you didn't ask me some questions. So what are you telling this